The next question comes from Chris Fraga, who says, what is the best way to approach trying to actually learn theory and learning modes as well? And that's a great question. And a lot of times people are surprised by the initial answer that I tend to give to this, which is if you really want to understand scales and modes and kind of the theoretical application of all of that stuff, you have to start by learning all of your chords. And I remember my first jazz teacher telling me this. He said, if you want to learn all your scales, learn all your chords. And I was like, what does that mean? Okay. If you learn major triads and minor triads in every single key, that is the foundation for learning every type of scale and every type of mode. So one of the first things I give to all my students who ask me about this, I say, here is every note in every minor tonality as far as the triad letters of every minor chord you're ever going to play in every single key. And here is every note of every major chord or every major triad in every single key. You have to have a gigantic vocabulary of chord voicings around the instrument with majors and minors before you even think about using scales and modes correctly. For example, if I said to the average guitar player, play me a G chord, they're probably going to play this. And I'll say, okay, play me another G chord, and they'll probably play this. And then I say to them, play me 50 more G chords. And they look at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, no, that's what you need to know. You need to know how to take any given chord, any triad of 3 notes, whether it's major or minor, no matter what key it's in. And you need to know that chord everywhere on your guitar in every inversion with as many different voicings as you can. Okay, because every voicing and every inversion of a chord has a different personality. This G major and this G major and this G major are all slightly different stories. I want to eventually, when someone says G major, I want to eventually visualize the entire guitar, every note from a G triad all around the instrument. Also, I want to know my triads vertically, which is when I play them all at the same time as a stack of notes. But I also want to know my triads horizontally, which is playing them melodically. So instead of thinking of this G chord as a chord voicing, I want to think of it as a melodic pattern or an arpeggio. There are dozens of ways to phrase arpeggios besides just straight up and down. That's a whole different conversation. But here's the important thing. If I know my anchor points for G major, if I know the root 3/5 of a G major triad or a G major chord, what happens when I fill in other notes in between the notes of that chord? Well, if I take a G major arpeggio or a G major triad and I fill in a couple of passing tones, now I'm playing a scale. And if I do various combinations of many different types of passing tones, I get many kinds of scales and modes, which means your triads are your anchor points for learning all of your scales and modes. As a matter of fact, this time of year, I like to use this example, okay? If I have a C major chord on the piano, okay, C major triad is C, E, G, right? Three Stooges. Hello, hello, hello. And let's say I put the octave of the root note of the chord on the top. So I've got a 4-note C major chord with the root on the bottom and the root on the top. So root, major third, fifth, root. Okay. I could play that vertically with all the notes simultaneously, or I could play it melodically or horizontally by playing the notes one at a time. What if I went, okay, now my C major chord is the Star Spangled Banner. Okay, well, here's my question. What am I not playing? All right, when I play this C chord, I'm not playing any of the other notes that are in between it. Well, what if I did? What if I take a descending C major and I just fill in the rest of the musical alphabet and I go, okay, and I get Joy to the World, okay? Well, that's a scale. All I did was take the chord and put in additional passing tones between the notes of the chord itself. Now, what if I take Joy to the World and I play it with another type of scale or mode? Well, guess what's not going to change? The triad. The triad stays the same. What if I play Joy to the World with the Spanish Phrygian scale, okay? Ooh, okay, that's pretty spicy, but what didn't I change? That. Okay, all of those major triad or major chord notes were still in there. So if you really want to understand how theory works, especially with melodic creation with scales and modes, triads in every major key and triads in every minor key is the price of admission to becoming a great guitar player. And you have to know your triads vertically as chord voicings. You have to know your triads horizontally or melodically as single note phrases. But you also have to know your triads as far as the personality of each chord that you hear. What is the emotion and the unique sound of each chord that you experience? Because the more you internalize the emotional content of a chord voicing, the easier it is to then hear in your head, how could I connect the notes in this triad with various types of passing tones or other dissonant tension notes? So once again, if I've got a C major triad, and instead of using a major scale or a diatonic scale to play Joy to the World, what if I played the Lydian dominant scale? Okay, what's not going to change? That the chord is still there, but it's my passing tones and dissonances that flavor this chord. So here's Joy to the World Lydian dominant. Pretty interesting sounding scale, but once again, what did I keep as the fixed notes, the notes of the triad? So if you really want to understand scales and modes as far as their melodic application musically, start with your chords. It's very counterintuitive. To understand melody, you have to understand harmony, but this is where I've got the best results. So good luck.